Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom or Tom. How's it going?
Tony, currently seated on what I'm sure for you is a disappointingly comfortable and luxurious pull-out couch. Was that a bummer when you walked in? You're like, wow, that looks really comfortable. Too bad I don't get to sleep on that this week.
It was a little disappointing. You got a nice setup here. You got a nice suite. You got a TV. You've got a chest of drawers that you can put all of your clothes in for our stay here. So you got a nice little mini bar over there with a microwave oven to cook foods quickly or keep them cold.
I'm going to keep my clothes in the microwave so that they're nice and warm for the Maryland game on Saturday.
I will stay warm by staying inside for the Maryland game like a smart person, not like a buffoon. All right. I shouldn't say that because fans are also outside and fans kind of keep the lights on around here. So I meant photographers are buffoons. That's mainly what I'm trying to say. So thank you all for joining us.
We appreciate you being here. I appreciate it. I can't speak for Tony.
No. As long as you're watching from indoors, I appreciate it. If you're watching outdoors, you're a buffoon, especially in Columbus. Now here it's like 45. It's nice out.
Yeah, we actually toyed briefly with the idea of going outside and just shooting this outside. And then I opened the door and it was like highway noise and then a flock of geese flying over honking. And I was like, well, it would be extremely on brand to shoot this outside, but also.
No, and I was just out there on the patio doing a radio hit and a bunch of flocks of birds kept flying over. I'm like, I need to move under the awning here to make sure I don't get hit by anything. Has that ever happened to you, Tom?
I don't know. It's happened to my car. I don't think it's happened to me personally. I hear it's good luck.
Is it really?
I believe the Italians say it's good luck.
It's not.
No.
I don't remember having any good luck from it.
No.
That was in your mouth.
No, it was on my shoulder back in Little League right on my best mesh shirt. That means it hits the skin as well. So
2 minutes in, off the rails already.
All right.
Good.
So anyway, thank you all for joining us. Reminder to go ahead and hit that thumbs up because how could you not like this? And also, if you want to ask some questions, throw your questions in the chat. Kevin will get to them. He will only ask the best questions, the best of your questions. The rest he will just ignore.
Unless they're super chats.
Unless they're super chats. Well, those are the best questions, frankly, I've found. And also questions about, or not even questions, comments about Tom's clothes or apparel. Oh, what do we got there? What do we see there on that left right there? What's that say, Tom?
See, what I'd like is for people to just why don't you just tell me what you want? Like what we have concerns about colors, we have concerns about brands, we have concerns about but just
anyway.
What
was our name for Kevin? I forget.
Juicio?
Juiciano.
Yes.
And you're Tom Fuller.
All right, let's get back onto the show. Tom.
I saw a question.
Yes, please.
Before we even started the show, we saw a question about the weather. So let's talk about the weather.
Yeah.
What does everyone want to talk about?
The weather.
It's the weather. So it is warmer. We drove through all sorts of snow in West Virginia and got here in one piece. The weather here is much nicer than it is in Columbus right now. The game time temperature is going to be about 43, 45 degrees, sunny, relatively warm, no wind. Weather should basically not be a factor unless someone loses a football in the sun, essentially.
Yeah, well, and as we know, Julian Fleming has talked about that in the past. And I think this is why Julian Fleming has not been catching many deep balls. Brian Hartline told him when you're out catching a pass and you lose it in the sun, catch the sun. And he's done that. Now the last few weeks, been no sun. How many catches Julian Fleming had? Not many. No. Now that the sun is back out, look for Julian Fleming to have a big day, which is also one of your bold predictions. Not that bold, but a bold prediction. Looks like we have a super chat.
We do have a super chat. Ryan Dawes says, beer and crab cakes, ?
Well, I would say exclamation point. No, there will eventually be some crab cakes at some point.
Yeah, well, we're doing a Hungry Hunger Huddle segment at dinner tonight. I think we're also probably going to aim to try and do one at the stadium tomorrow. They have a very unique delicacy at the stadium. I think we're going to try and do one at the stadium as well. Crab. It's crab popcorn though. So yes, we'll
anything gourmet. I'm pretty big into.
And let me tell you, you throw Old Bay on just about anything savory. Old Bay is going to improve it just a little bit.
Yeah, not necessarily, but I think in terms of the weather, that will not be the deciding factor in how many points scored or how Ohio State's offense does. The deciding factor not even the Maryland defense. The deciding factor, I think, is Ryan Day.
Mm-hmm.
And how many points does he want? How many is good enough before he's like, okay, it's Michigan week.
Yeah, and that's something that every year, that's kind of one of my favorite things. Is it's sort of, you have to do it by feel. It's like the old Potter Stewart thing. Like, I know it when I see it. When is it Michigan week? It's actually kind of very similar to the Potter Stewart thing if you think about it. The moment usually in the second half of a game where it's the week before Michigan and that game functionally ceases to be a competitive contest. And, the week before the 2018 Michigan game, when we were here and they played the 52-51 overtime game, that moment did not come until the clock hit 0, and then they went through a first overtime period. There have been years where they get, they're up 30 points in the second half, and it's like, all right. So what to you is the moment? What is there a threshold that you think there is for, this is the moment when, okay, this game has ceased to be a competitive contest, and now, everyone can officially move their brains onto Michigan week?
I think it just depends on the game and what is going on to that point, because there have been different games have different feel. Like in terms of the Michigan game that I always go back to is the 2007, where it didn't matter how, Michigan was not going to score more than their 3 points or whatever. So Ohio State could punt and play field position all they wanted. What does Maryland's offense look like tomorrow? Because if they're not moving the ball, if they look like what they did against Penn State, then Michigan week might be Ohio State's first touchdown in the third quarter. Michigan week might be halftime, and that's a 35-7 or a 35-0, something like that, where it's like, okay, it's here. Like, everybody celebrate, break out the champagne because it's here, and sing Old Lang Syne and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels like this is not a game where Ohio State's probably going to win, 70-7 or something like that. But if they're up 3 scores with the ball in the second half, or they're up 4 scores or something like that, it's probably basically done at that point. The only interesting thing there is you also have the college football playoff consideration there. And, if they beat Maryland 35-17, is that going to make a material difference to the college football playoff committee, as opposed to kind of finishing the drill and beating Maryland 56-17, something like that? Is that something that Ryan Day is coaching towards, or is Ryan Day just kind of thinking, all right, get out of this thing healthy, and if it's a 3-score win, it's a 3-score win. It doesn't matter. Get out of this thing healthy. That's the most important thing.
That is the most important thing. But I don't think a score against Maryland factors in unless you've got a 1-loss Ohio State team and you're talking about a 1-loss Tennessee team, something like that, where now they start to look at their last few games and, oh, you only 31-17 over Maryland. Oh, gosh, but did you see what Penn State did to them? That's crazy that you only beat them by 14 points. Is this the real Ohio State? Did we just see the real Ohio State against Maryland? And, that's one question where you would ask the chair, hey, when you look at these teams and you see a struggle, how much do you factor in that the rivalry game is that next week? And because I think that is also a real factor, that it's like the look ahead, it's the get out early, that whole, like, you combine those two things and that can lead to some tough games, and it almost leads to expectations for tough games. And Michigan is in a similar boat when they've got Illinois coming to town.
Yeah, it's interesting because at October 10th or something like that, this looked like, oh man, Michigan and Ohio State might have like legitimate trap games the week before the game, and then Illinois has kind of fallen apart, and then they're missing their running back, I think, this week. Maybe. And the defense is okay, but it's not, I'm going to be very interested to see how well Blake Corum runs against that Illinois defense. But, then you have September Maryland, and then there's November Maryland. And it's, the glide path is like when you see one of those like 1 second before disaster kind of shows, and it's the plane going into the mountain, that's kind of Maryland. Maryland hit the mountain about 2 weeks ago, and their condition has not improved materially. So this is a team that they have players. They have Raheem Jarrett, Talia Tagovailoa is a good player. The running back, good. They have individual talent on this team. This is not a team that's going to match up across the field with Ohio State, position by position.
They have guys all over the place that Ohio State wanted. that Ohio State recruited, that Ohio State was in conversation with. And so there's talent, but it's just the depth, the consistency of the talent is another thing. The development of the talent is another thing, where guys all over this team have not necessarily continued on from like where they started as freshmen. Like even Raheem Jarrett was probably better as a freshman than maybe he is now, and that's across the board with the receivers. But Talia Tagovailoa, is he getting better? He's not getting better right now. He's been terrible the last couple of weeks, coming back from an injury, not knowing how healthy he is, but he's healthy enough to be out there. And he's not out there doing very well, but he's getting harassed. He's getting sacked a lot from an offensive line that I believe was maybe the only Big Ten offensive line to return all 5 starters from last season. So it's an experienced line, so you would think they'd be doing better. But as you said, there's the September Maryland, there's the November Maryland, and never the two shall meet.
And we have to give quick congratulations to Chad, who he and his wife just had their first baby.
Congratulations.
That is a very exciting day. Here's my dad pro tip for you. While you are in the hospital, get as much sleep as you can. There are nurses there who will take care of the baby. You will be like, no, I feel guilty. This is my brand new child. I should be. No, do your little skin to skin thing and all that. And then when they say, can we take the baby? You say yes, and you get your sleep, because as soon as you get home, the baby's going to stop sleeping. You'll be like, I miss sleep. Get it now. That is my pro tip for you.
Your pro tip is, as soon as you can, be a lazy father. Great job.
That is just that is the words of experience right there. Just take it from me.
Yeah, so definitely congratulations to Chad and his wife and their new child.
Eric wants to know, will Ohio State running game stay on track against Maryland?
I think so, because when you look at what Maryland has done recently against the run, it's not good. And what they've done against the pass is not good. So when they're not doing either one of those things good,
it seems like Ohio State might have some options, is what I'm hearing.
And as I said earlier in the week, when you look at Ohio State's done running the ball, and then you have these 2 games against Penn State and Iowa, they are anomalies throughout all of that. However, they happened, and so they're still fact. But I don't think Maryland is one that can bring those facts back into evidence type of thing. Like we're going to strike these things from the record, and then we're just going to look at the games where Maryland has been a part, and they've not been a part of stopping the run against recent defenses. Now recent offenses. They had some where they held like Cincinnati to like 40 yards rushing on 20 carries. So that must have been September Maryland, and now they're November Maryland, and teams are running on them, and I would expect that to continue, even not knowing exactly who all is going to be running the ball for Ohio State.
Yeah, that kind of is the $64,000 question right now. Is you go through the Ohio State running back room, and last week Trevion Henderson was out. He's missed a couple games in a row. I don't think he's played since Penn State, right? And Mayan Williams left the game last week. Looked like a decently sprained ankle. Ryan Day, after the game, kind of said, yeah, not as bad as it looked. Evan Pryor out for the season. Chip Trainum was a game time decision last week, didn't play. So you had Dallin Hayden and you had Xavier Johnson last week at the end of the game. And Ryan Day said they're expecting to get a couple guys back. To me, Chip Trainum is the free space in the bingo card. If you were game time decision last week, you were very close. There's no reason to suspect that he wouldn't be back. And the other name, so then is the other person who's expected to get back Trevion Henderson or Mayan Williams? And all week we've been saying it makes so much sense to give Mayan Williams a week to rest it, get him as healthy as you can for Michigan, and then Trevion Henderson hasn't played in a couple weeks. You're gonna want to get him on the field, get him back into the swing of things with that offense before the Michigan game, so you're not just going into that Michigan game kind of cold.
Yeah, you want Mayan Williams to run as hard and as violently as he did against Indiana. So give him the week off to get ready for that and to get as healthy as he can so that he can do that. And Trevion Henderson, you want him to get going again. I also think you want Chip Trainum to touch the ball a little bit in this game so that if he does have to be called on against Michigan, it won't be his first, or it won't be his second carry. Once he have like 1 carry for 9 yards this year, I think. So like you want to get him out there and just get him some of the game speed stuff and the action and that kind of experience, because practice is great, but he hasn't done it more than once in a game since Arizona State. So get him as many, I don't say as many snaps, but 5, 6, 7 carries, something like that, to where you have built it up and you have something to go back on, and you got some experience there.
Yes, I think I'm with you there. Frankly, I think it would be great for them to get at least 3 running backs, at least 5 to 6 carries.
No, I don't agree with that. I think that you're spreading it too thin. There. Top everybody out at 4 carries, in fact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. I saw a question in the chat about Chip Trayanum and whether he might be just his size make him a good short yardage back. And they're gonna you want to have Travion Henderson be able to get those kind of yards. Dallin Hayden, I think, just is not quite there yet, and that's just a true freshman, hasn't been in the program long enough to really kind of put on a little bit of that extra good weight. But yeah, I think Chip Trayanum is someone who could fill that role. I don't know if they're going to trust him yet in those truly, truly big moments, because if you're not getting hit in practice and they don't hit the running backs a ton in practice, how sure are you he's going to not have ball security issues? Because you can, that's something that if you are not, up to game speed, we hear guys talk all the time about the fact you can't simulate game speed, game intensity in practice. Like, you can do whatever you want. It's not the same thing. So I don't know if, 3rd and 1 in the, near midfield against Michigan is going to be the time when you want to, I guess it's time to find out if Chip Trayanum can hang on to the football. That's, you got to kind of know that you have a pretty high degree of confidence in the answer to that question before you put him in that spot.
Yeah, and it's not just the ball security thing. It's how good is your nose for getting that yard, and what if the push isn't there? Because he's a bigger guy, like 5'11", 225 in terms of a running back. He's a bigger guy. But if he runs into the back of a guard or something like that, he's not going anywhere. He's going to be tackled in the backfield. So how is his vision and how is his nose for just finding that place? And it's not like you got to do a lot of looking for the 3rd and short stuff, the short yardage stuff. It's this way or it's that way generally. But how good is he at getting in there and not getting caught up in some of the trash and keeping your feet up and driving your legs and things like that? There's a lot of it to think about. And if he's just thinking about protect this ball, is he not thinking about the rest of the stuff that I held on to the ball, sure, but you got tackled at the line of scrimmage.
Mm-hmm.
So there are several factors in there, and I think this would be an interesting thing where maybe he's not the guy in on 3rd and short in the second half, and it's Dallin Hayden, and they're like, no, Dallin, you come out, Chip, you go in, just to get him some of those snaps.
Yeah, and I do expect to see, I would not expect a lot of Travion Henderson on Saturday. I think you get him 8 to 12 carries, maybe 15.
First quarter, just
let him get a bunch of. Yeah, I think the ideal situation for Ohio State on Saturday is you get Travion Henderson 8 to 10 carries in the first quarter and a half, and you're leading it 28 to 3, and then it's just kind of like, okay, and now you've knocked all the look, we've looked at you and all the rust is gone. You've knocked it all off. All right, fantastic. Go sit on the bench. Don't put a protective boot back on just to be absolutely sure about. Take no chances. Have all the cords marked on the sidelines so no one trips. Just take it as safe as possible. This is the interesting thing to me on Saturday in terms of when they pull guys off the field is going to be C.J. Stroud, because you have to keep him healthy for Michigan thing.
Mm-hmm.
You also have the Heisman thing, and you want him, they're going to want to get him 300 yards passing, 4 or 5 touchdowns, keep that scoreboard spinning on the pinball machine that is his stat line for this year. How do you balance, Ryan Day, obviously, I know that beating Michigan right now is his top priority. Sorry. Beating Maryland's his top priority, Tony, because you can't look past any. Okay. Once the Maryland game is safely in the bag, beating Michigan is his top priority. How do you balance that versus you also don't want to pull him out in the middle of the second quarter and have him finish 10 for 12 for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns because you're also trying to get him a Heisman Trophy.
Yeah, and I don't care what anybody says. They are trying to get him a Heisman Trophy, and not that they're doing anything that anybody else wouldn't do, but that would be great for the program, great for CJ, great for recruiting, all of that. So that goes into it a little bit, especially when you have a schedule as bad as Ohio State's. You can factor these things in, and this is one where that will factor in. But I think you can get all of that done in 2 possessions into the third quarter type of thing. And so, Tom, if I ask you over under touchdown passes for CJ Stroud and I say 3.5, how quickly do you say over? Like immediately?
Yeah, immediately.
It's 4.5 is where you're like, well, is it going to be 4? Is it going to be 5? And this, I'd probably feel better about 5 than 4, honestly, in terms of how many touchdown passes he's going to throw. But that also depends on, are they hitting some home runs in the running game? Are some of those scores going to the running backs from outside of the red zone? Because we know they like to throw the ball inside the red zone when they can. So, to caged over, and we saw Emeka Egbuka last week with a short touchdown catch. So I think if they can get it into the red zone, and they'll find guys. And it's been a while since Marvin Harrison has had a 3 touchdown game, so I think it's about time. He's due.
What do you think is wrong with him?
Well, what I think, nothing, because you saw his suit last week before the game. I don't think there's anything wrong with that guy. I would blame everybody else before I'd blame Marvin Harrison for anything. It's everybody else's fault.
I tweeted out a picture of that suit yesterday, and if you did not see it, it was scarlet, like a fully scarlet suit, and he's got sunglasses on. And I tweeted it out with a caption that was something like, if someone's not sure what swag is, just show them this picture. And as quickly corrected that was in fact in drip and not swag. So that was my how do you do fellow kids moment last Saturday. So drip, Marvin Harrison's drip, Tony, apparently off the chain.
Oh, no, Tom, end the show. I can't take it any longer. You are so unhip.
Treasure the Torah wants to know what food is Maryland known for, and I believe Maryland's only known for 2 things.
All right.
One of them is football, so I think Maryland's only known for 1 thing.
Turtle soup?
No.
Maryland is known for taco meat in the press box.
Okay, you've referenced that several times this year. You probably should share the story for people who are not.
Kevin, was this 2018? Was the taco?
It would have been the first year.
2016. Oh, so 2014. Wow. So yes, back in 2014, Maryland, the press box meal for the media was they called it chili, but it was like taco meat, and the vessel for eating the meat was a styrofoam bowl. So it's like, imagine going to Taco Bell and being like, just give me the taco meat in a bowl. Like not a BOL, like just a BOWL, like just plastic styrofoam bowl, and that's what your meal is. Now later on they did have some other stuff, but it just it was a welcome to the moment, welcome to the Big Ten moment that the Maryland athletic department was not. I don't know who they thought we were. We don't just now. Did we eat it? Yes, we ate it. Did we like it? No, but that doesn't mean we weren't going to eat it.
You got to remember, it was 2014. Maryland folks didn't know a lot about Ohio. They thought Cincinnati and Columbus were the same place.
Oh, you know what? I wonder if that's it. We're like, yeah, just these Ohio people we've heard they like terrible food, so give them this.
It's like in the movie Better Off Dead, where they have the French exchange student, and the mom is like, I've made all of your favorites. French bread, French fries.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, welcome, Ohio people. We have made you chili.
Yeah.
We made it bad. That's how we understand you like it.
Well, and you've now explained it in a way that I can understand it. I can no longer fault them for this. This is where you blame Ohio. This is where you blame the Cincinnati people, who really, I mean, let's be honest, they're Ohio adjacent more than Ohio, but I don't like that we are now tainted by this entire brown cinnamon gravy meat thing.
French dressing. I love that movie. I haven't seen the movie in a while.
I don't know if I've ever seen it, actually.
So good. John Cusack.
Mm-hmm. I've seen most John Cusack movies, including One Crazy Summer with Demi Moore. Very good.
Anyway, so I'm just scrolling through questions here.
Yeah, I got some that I missed.
Okay, go ahead and throw some question up there. Eric wants to know, will Travion play, and will the running game finally stay on track? I mean, we are expecting, based on what Ryan Day has said this week, that there's two guys back. The logical two to come back would be Chip Trayanum and Travion Henderson, because you want to get Travion Henderson on track. And Mine Williams has been running plenty recently.
Mhm.
You're not super worried about rust with him. He has a newer injury. He just suffered the injury last week. It would make a lot of sense for them to sit him, keep him at home, keep rest, ice, compression, elevation. Keep those feet up on the couch, and watch the game at home. And bring Travion Henderson on the trip. We will all find out together. 9 a.m. on Saturday, we'll have our live pregame show. That is when the availability report will come out, so we'll be able to talk about that then. But that's sort of what we're anticipating based on what Ryan Day said this week and what sort of makes sense.
We may go at 8:55 since that's when the availability report is made available. So just set your clocks back 5 minutes or ahead 5 minutes. I don't know the math.
The JP Shugart's pregame show.
But I would say, don't you think the running game is back on track now?
Yeah, it feels like it is, because Indiana was not, a particularly daunting team. Indiana is not Georgia, but they also have held opponent rushing attacks to, what was it, 3.6 yards a carry, something like that. It was pretty solid.
Mhm.
And then Ohio State, Mine Williams ran for 177 yards or something like that, and Ohio State ran for 350 or something like that. I mean, that was a very, very impressive, sort of baby I'm back moment for the Ohio State rushing attack. And I don't know that anything you see against Maryland is going to officially stamp that as, yes, everything is officially not a concern heading into the Michigan game. But you sort of saw what you would have wanted to see against Indiana. Not that it definitively proved that everything fixed, but if they had addressed issues and fixed some things, like that's what it would have looked like.
Well, and even if they're rushing for 200 yards against Penn State and Iowa, it's still none of it matters until you do it against Michigan.
Mhm.
So I know people can go back and look at those two games. I think what they did against Northwestern was pretty impressive to be able to do that when you can't throw the ball. You still rush for 200 yards, and you did it in different ways. You used your quarterback. You didn't just stick with rock. You only had two options, and you kept going like, okay, let's try scissors now. Oh, scissors is working. And so you did what you could, and then you came up with some more stuff. And the running game is, I'm sure you've probably talked to Ross about the running game stuff. He had some good stuff about that at BuckeyeHuddle.com, breaking those things down and the some of the stuff they're doing, and they'll continue to do, I think. And then you've got the momentum going, and you carry it into Michigan. But it doesn't, like, everything that they've done to this point only tells you what they've done to this point. It doesn't say that this is what's going to happen. They're going to run the ball against Michigan. I think they're going to run the ball against Michigan.
And I don't think they yards a carry. That's probably okay.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead and check that one out. But he talked about all the different stuff, and the answer, the question was sort of like, was the offensive line better? Was this, was it scheme stuff? Was it just guys, running backs running, hard, going more north south, not dancing? And the answer was kind of like, yeah, it's a little bit of all of it. Ross talks a lot about the fact that that when they're running inside zone, you get Mine Williams going north south, and he hits that hole, and he's running aggressively, and he's breaking tackles, and he's making a guy miss in the hole. That all that stuff works together. When they're running stretch, you've seen them run stretch a little bit recent weeks. You're going more east west. It's like, I don't like that hole. I'm going to skip the next one. No, should have done the last one. Well, too bad, I missed it. And the question for Ross was, are they looking at this as you're running that to get away from some tendencies so that then you can go, now look, we don't have tendencies. Now we've done other stuff, and now we can go back to the stuff we want to do, and it's not predictable. You can hear that whole show. Just search the Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning podcast. And if you want to hear from Ross, everyone loves hearing from Ross. He is everyone's smart football friend. So I generally put his name right in the title. Like it's never like Tony Gerdeman. What Ohio State needs? No one cares what Tony thinks. But it's Ross. It's always like Ross Fulton analysis. So if you search, that's a little sadder than I was hoping to make you. But if you just search Ross Fulton analysis on YouTube, you can find it there as well.
Because they do like running out of the pistol, but then when everybody knows that they're going to run it out of the pistol, it makes it impossible to run out of the pistol. They've been throwing more out of the pistol, so now they can go back to the stuff that they want to do, which is run out of the pistol. And that's where they're effective. That's where they all prefer to do it. Travion Henderson likes having the ability to be that far back and look and see what he's got. And Mayan Williams has been effective at it as well. So you break those tendencies so that you can get back into them. And then now you don't know. The defense has to assume that it's both pretty much. And what happens when you assume?
You do something with you and me, and I can't remember what it was. Alcatraz Smedry says, "Will Tua prep us for JJ McCarthy?" How banged up is Tua, and how much is Talia? Sorry.
Yeah, no. He was running around quite a bit in the Penn State game that I saw, but it's more running for his life more than running like as part of the running game, because at this point, I don't think they want him running the ball.
Yeah.
Whereas JJ McCarthy, I would not be surprised to see him carry the ball 10 or 12 times against Ohio State. And 6 of those are called runs, 3 are like read options, and 3 are scrambles, something like that, where you need to move the ball, and he's a way to do it. But I think, and we were driving here, and Kevin was doing a radio hit, and they're talking about Ohio State having trouble with the running quarterback. It's like everybody has trouble with the running quarterback, which is exactly what Kevin said. It's a guy that you can't account for, and so you have to just do special things to account for. But Steel Chambers, Lathan Ransom, those guys are able to track those guys down if they're spying. But I think it will help. I don't know that. I think it will help with the scrambling portion. I don't know how much they're actually going to be running Talia.
We have a super chat from Espressi Steezy. Espeasy Steezy.
Why don't you make that full screen and then you would see it?
Ohio adjacent hurt. Stop the chili hate. My question is, if we only have Chip and Dallin, do you think our run game will be enough to beat Michigan? And I think this is probably a little bit of an academic conversation, because I would expect one or both, probably both, of Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams to be back for the Michigan game. If it is just Dallin Hayden, Chip Trainum, I feel like the answer is, the grade there is incomplete, because we really don't know what they have with him in terms of a running back. In terms of Dallin Hayden, I have really liked what I've seen out of Dallin Hayden, and he's actually been more effective on some of those kind of stretch runs than even the older guys have. And he's been, he's had a couple 100-yard games already this season, so he's been good. I don't think you're going to win the game by having Dallin Hayden run the ball 25 times. Could Dallin Hayden run it 12 times for 60 yards? And is that enough? Maybe. But I think this is kind of more of an academic question, because I don't think it's going to. I have no reason to suspect it's going to come down to those are the two guys.
Well, you would also have Xavier Johnson in there. I think how it could come down to those two guys is if it's a second half thing where Travion and Mayan both go down in the first half, because you can't say that, they're not going to leave a game due to injury.
Right.
Because they both have. So it could be, if the game is 14-all at the half and you're down to Dallin Hayden and Chip Trainum and Xavier Johnson, now you've got a ball game. But I do think they're comfortable with him. I think we've seen that. He's effective. And a lot of the running that he's doing, it's like, the defense knows he's running. So his average isn't what it would be in a real game. So he very well could be a 6.5 yard per carry kind of guy this year. And what does that translate to against Michigan? Yeah, if it's 13 carries for 60 yards in the second half, I think those are winnable numbers.
Yeah, if that's second half numbers, that's fine. If you're anywhere in that 5 yards a carry range, that's enough that the running game is doing what it needs to do. They don't need to run the ball for 400 yards against Michigan to win the game. They need to, this is the old balance is not running for as many yards as it is passing. Balance is being able to do both things. That's enough running that if it's 13 carries for 60 yards and it's not one of the carries is 58 yards. If it's, you're kind of consistently picking up 4 or 5 yards on the ground, that's enough. That's all they really need. It's just sort of stay on schedule, get that 4 or 5 yards on first down, get half of what you need on second down, and then, pick it up on third down. If they're doing that with some consistency and they're able to run the ball in the situations where they want to do that I think would be fine. And I think Dallin Hayden could do that potentially for them.
I think you could see a Star is Born type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you end up having to rely on a freshman and he blows up and forces Travion Henderson to transfer, I guess.
Probably not. Craig Wagner says, Michigan fan here. Love these guys. Good humor and insight. Good luck on the Maryland tune-up for the game. After years of meh, should give you a decent game this year. I mean, I think Michigan gave Ohio State a pretty decent game last year. But,
meh.
Tom,
a lot of flu going on at Ohio State last year. So
there was, I think the 19 and 18 games were both fairly lopsided in Ohio State's favor. But you go back before that, 2017, that was a pretty close game into the fourth quarter. 2016 obviously went down to the very end. So even 2014, Ohio State won by 22 points, but it was close. It was close late, and Ohio State scored a couple touchdowns late. So, even the years where 2013 was a close game, 2012 was a close game, 2011 was a close game that Michigan won. I mean, there have been a lot of, people are remembering the 18 and 19 games and going, Ohio State just kills Michigan every year. It's like, that's not really true. Ohio State has won pretty consistently over the last 20 years, but more of those games have been close than you're probably remembering.
Well, and the thing about Urban Meyer, he was 7-0 against Michigan, but they were favored in several of those games, and I don't think they covered that often.
Mm-hmm.
And there were games that were closer than they should have been, but they won. And Ryan Day didn't last year, so he does not quite have the record of Urban Meyer. But I think offensively, this is still the same kind of program it was when not quite 2019 with the running game that they had, but I think this is a more physical offense. I think when you look at last year's game, and I know it's still Maryland week. And this is something we're going to talk about 40 hours worth of time next week in terms of what did Michigan do from last season to beat Ohio State? What did Ohio State do over the last season to beat Michigan? Because I don't know what changes that Michigan has made. They brought in J.J. McCarthy, but I don't know that has made them materially more different than last year in a game against Ohio State.
Yeah, and we'll get into a bunch of this stuff, obviously, but I think that when you're looking at this, Michigan fans, I think a lot of them are looking at this as, well, you saw what happened last year. And let's be super clear about this. Michigan ran Ohio State over in the second half of that game. For basically the last 35 minutes or so, the last 7 drives of that game for Michigan, they had 2. One, there was an end of half where they kind of did a kneel down or just ran it into the line or something, and an end of game where they didn't kneel down. Outside of that, there were 5 drives. They scored touchdowns on all 5 of those drives. In the second half, they averaged like 11 yards per play. I mean, it was as bad a defensive performance. It was like 1995 Ohio State run defense bad. You had not seen that for a long time. You have also not seen that this year. And, next week is the week when we all find out together. Has Jim Knowles fixed the problems that he was brought in and paid $1.9 million to fix? Or is the results that we've seen on the field where they've looked great for most of the year, is that a result of just crappy Big Ten offenses? And I think it's about 70% Jim Knowles has fixed it and 30% crappy Big Ten offenses, but we're gonna find out.
I don't know, Tom. Regardless of how many points. Mine went dead.
No, use yours.
Okay.
Use that one. Yours went dead.
Mine is green. Tom's is red.
It's dead.
Okay.
And let's just talk into both mics. Regardless of how many points Ohio State gives up, if they lose, the headline on the story is Ohio State pays $1.9 million to Jim Knowles to lose the Michigan game. I don't care.
Yeah, I think it's been so much better this year, and they have not gotten gashed in, they have not had like a Tulsa game where it was a bad team that was still gashing them. Like it just. But I mean, this is one of these. Jim Knowles has. You think about where Jim Knowles has coached over his career, and it's Duke and Cornell and Oklahoma State, and it's like I don't know that Jim Knowles I know like Oklahoma State plays Bedlam every year, and okay, but I don't know that. I always wonder guys coming into this rivalry for the first time, where it's just kind of like people can tell you, and it's like, oh well, this is it's the biggest rivalry in sports. And it's like, oh wow, that sounds great. I can't wait. And then it's like you get to the first one, it's like, oh, they weren't kidding. Oh, this city really does go completely crazy for this 1 week a year. It is, I'm looking forward to that. I would love to ask Jim Knowles after the game, maybe after the season, or maybe this is before the bowl game kind of thing. Like, so how did you enjoy Michigan week? Because it is something unlike just about anything else.
Well, it reminds me of the Penn rivalry, the Cornell Penn rivalry, but I'm interested to hear that as well, because we love this rivalry. So you love to hear people go through their first experience with it, and if it's a bad experience, maybe ask them about it in May or in like 3 years after the fact.
Is it time to talk about Tennessee?
Yeah, exactly. But when it's a good experience, to hear the emotion that went into it, and this, how much they thought they knew, but they didn't know. And I know, Tom, this is Maryland week, and we'll have time to talk about all of that stuff later on. Yes.
Still Maryland week?
Ask me again in the first quarter.
Obviously, Tony Gerdeman's burner account asked earlier if how much he had to super chat for me to wear an Ohio State thing. My hat literally says Buckeye. Buckeye hat on it right there. It's right there. And I have super chat from Tom Moore. How much do you have to pay to get working microphones?
Super chat from I need more time to charge batteries.
His follow-up question was, I changed my question to how much do I have to pay for Tom to never speak kids lingo again?
Well, and it's not even kids. That's adult lingo, but you're just an older adult now. And so $50?
At least. Yeah, at least.
It's going to have to be a lot, because, Tom, you would have to give up the kind of talk that you prefer. Like, you'd like talking to the
Yes,
kids.
I do like talking about the drip and what have you. Yes. It is.
I think it's just drip. It's not the drip. I think. I don't know.
Is that like the Ukraine? Sorry, the drip. Need more cowbell, says Maryland week ended on Tuesday. I mean,
yeah. I think Maryland week ended after the 31-0 blowout against Penn State, because it's like that's not a team that is worth putting up a fight. Like they're just, it's not worth being concerned about. It seems crazy to say 1 week beforehand, but again, that's not the team that Ohio State is playing this week. It's a different Maryland team. It's at home. They're scattered anyway. Like you never necessarily know what you're going to get from Maryland. So it's best to expect their best, and also like how much is Ryan Day watching that Michigan-Maryland game or expecting that Maryland team, rather than the team the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and you can't, as a coach, treat them as casually as we're treating them.
No.
You have to go in assuming you're going to get the Maryland team that's going to give you a 4-quarter battle. That game was in Ann Arbor, right?
Yeah.
Was it? Yeah. I mean, and yes, Maryland scored in the final 30 seconds or so of that game to make it a 7-point game, but it was a 7-point game, and they had an onside kick to potentially try and win the game at the end.
And Maryland gave away a couple of possessions in that game as well. It wasn't a 7-point game per se, but it was still a close game. That could have been a 7-point game if they hadn't given away the possessions that they did.
And, Ohio State is not the only team playing a team that is, boy, this would have been a lot more interesting 2 months ago. Michigan has Illinois tomorrow. JJ wants to know, is Chase Brown playing for Illinois tomorrow? That is the star running back for Illinois. And I think the answer is we don't know.
Yeah, Brett Bielema has been kind of coy about that. The last I heard yesterday was like, well, we'll see. Certainly didn't seem like he was going to play immediately after the injury. But this is also the time where you're not overly open in terms of the injuries, especially in a game against Michigan. You're like, yeah, Well, we're hoping to get him back, and some when you say something like that, it means like no, but we don't want to just say that. They could certainly use him, but what's the backup situation? Is an 80% Chase Brown better than the 100% backup?
Probably, but is he at 80%? I mean, that's and they have Northwestern next week, and they are still theoretically in the Big Ten West race, where there are 4 teams. One of the most, I still haven't wrapped my head around the fact that no one controls their own destiny in the Big Ten West.
It's just Iowa, right?
No, there's no one controls their own destiny. So there is no one who just needs to win 2 games and that's it. It seems like it should be like mathematically impossible for that to be true. But because there's 4 teams in the race, it's like, everyone will have, if they win 2 games, they'll have a tiebreaker with one team and they will win that tiebreaker, but they'll lose the tiebreaker with another team. So it depends on what happens in other games. But Illinois is still, they have blown their, front runner kind of status there, where we were pretty sure we were going to get to go see old Bert in Indianapolis if Ohio State takes care of business against Michigan. That now is not, Ohio State, Iowa part 2, Tony, like that. No. That's Iowa is like, there's a whole chart with, here's all the different outcomes and who would go to Indianapolis out of the West in that scenario. And Iowa was like, I sort of tracked through, like, here's what I think will probably happen in all these games, and landed on Iowa. And then it was like, no, it was like going through one of those choose your own adventure books. I'm like, no, I don't like that answer. I'm going to go back through and I'm going to change some results. And then it was like, turn to page set 13 to find out who represents the West in Indianapolis. And it was like, Iowa again. No, I don't like that at all.
You know how the Big Ten changed the rule in 2020 when Ohio State needed to go to the Big Ten championship, and they're like, okay, you only need to play so many games. What if the new tiebreaker would be like Rochambeau between all of the coaches, the head coaches? So you just have like, Ferentz going against Bielema, and just whoever wins that. So that way you don't need to see any more games, don't need to see more action, and in fact, just do it now. Like, let's just cut out the last couple of weeks of the season from the Big Ten West, and let's just decide it off the field so that we don't have to watch any more Big Ten West.
I'm trying to decide if the Rochambeau that you're referencing is the Rochambeau that I'm thinking of. Does it involve kicking?
It's the kicking. It's the kicking one. It's not the rock, paper, scissors in French one.
Okay. So in that case, Bert is definitely the favorite once again. If they do make that rule change, I think you got to go with Bert there. So,
well, can he get his leg high enough?
The Iowa tattoo. Can you imagine Kirk Ferentz getting kicked in the leg, or kicked by a leg with an Iowa tattoo on it? That would be bitter.
Sweet, bitter irony.
Yeah.
But they have so much kicking practice at Iowa.
That's true.
Steven says, what is the reason Mike Hall Jr. has limited playing time? Injury, run stopping, deficiencies, or conditioning?
Yeah, Jim Knowles talked about that on Tuesday. He said he's been battling injury since Michigan State week, when he only played 8 snaps, and he's been going through something and dealing with that. But also Ty Hamilton is playing better and better, so they're getting him out there. But yeah, Mike Hall dealing with an injury right now. Won't go into specifics about what it is, but it's something that's been bothering him for about a month now, a little bit more. And so he's still playing, but also he's more of a pass rushing guy right now, probably anyway. So I don't know what that means. I guess maybe we do know what that means for him next week against Michigan, but also probably not expecting a whole bunch of snaps for him this week so that he can be as healthy as possible next week. Maybe a lot of Jerron Cage.
Yeah, this would be a week to have a little more Jerron Cage, because I think I put him in the Mayan Williams bucket, which is, he's played enough that you don't have the Travion Henderson concerns with, being rusty. So let him play maybe a little bit and then sit him and get him into that Michigan game as healthy as you can, because he is, even if he is a pass rush guy and you're not expecting Michigan to be doing a lot of pass rush, to be in a lot of obvious passing situations, it still feels like he is such a disruptor in there, and he shoots those gaps. And, if it's 3rd and short and he can shoot one of those gaps and blow a play up in the backfield, that could be a really impactful thing against Michigan as well. So I do think they're going to want him as healthy as possible for that Michigan game. So yeah, for that reason, I'm not expecting a 30 snap game from Mike Hall tomorrow.
Yeah. We talked to Teron Vincent and Ty Hamilton this week on Wednesday. And somebody asked, hey Teron, what's it like? What do you think it's Ty Hamilton? What's he about? What's it like playing with him? And Teron's like, he's just a giant muscle. Like that's all Ty Hamilton is. He's just a giant muscle. And so I asked Ty, like, are you the strongest member of the team? He's like, well, you could say that. I'm like, you can say that. Well, you say that. He's like, yeah. Yeah. And then we asked him, like, are you the biggest and strongest of the Hamilton brothers? He's like, well, you know, I don't want to quite go there yet. They kind of declined to answer that one, I think, if I recall. But strongest member of the team, Ty Hamilton, shown up the last couple of weeks in the starting lineup, has been a force against the run, and they're going to need that some this week, more next week.
And for people, I assume people who are watching this will probably know this, but Ty Hamilton's older brother is Devon Hamilton, who was a defensive tackle for Ohio State a couple of years ago. Could he not Alexander Hamilton? No. Jake wants to know, what do you want to see most from the Buckeyes tomorrow? Run game working, Marvin getting help from Rebecca and Julian. What would be the most encouraging thing? Let's frame this around the Michigan game, because that's how we're sort of framing everything right now. What would be, to you, the most encouraging thing you could see from Ohio State in terms of making you think they have a better chance to beat Michigan?
Well, and we can answer this offensively and defensively. I think offensively for me, if Travion is out there, is he effective? I think if he's looking comfortable, he's looking patient, but also explosive, that would be tremendous. I think you bring up a good point with the question in terms of Emeka and Julian Fleming looking like not just a third option or a second option, but looking like they could be the alphas on any offense. So getting them back. Now, I know you've got some bold predictions with both of those guys, so I'm not hopeful. I'm hoping they're both shut down pretty emphatically tomorrow. But if they all look like they should be doubled, I think that would be encouraging.
Yeah, if you just see a good game from Julian Fleming, that would be, because I think Julian Fleming is the third guy out of that three right now, where Marvin Harrison Jr., like everyone wants to bracket Marvin Harrison Jr. And you kind of want to bracket Emeka Ibuka too. So, if you have Julian Fleming or you have Julian Fleming on the other side of the field from those guys, he's going to be one-on-one, and there's probably not going to be a safety over the top. You have to be able to hit that. You have to, if he's there, you have to be able to hit that and, hit a big play there. They did that against Iowa at the end of that game. They had one against Indiana last week where he was open over the middle downfield and just couldn't bring the pass in. If you can hit that, that really forces the defense to put the defense in a bad spot where then, okay, maybe you can't double Marvin Harrison, or you can't double Emeka Ibuka. So Julian Fleming does feel like he's kind of one of the keys to opening things up on the offensive side of the ball.
Just looking at Emeka's numbers, so he had 4 100-yard receiving games in his first 6 games, including a 90 and a 70. And then since then, 80, 53, 6, and 38. So if they can get him back going again, and try not to get him killed over the middle of the field while you're at it.
Mm-hmm.
But, and he's done some things in the run game as well. But, yeah, I think a 100-yard game from either him or Julian Fleming would be a positive outcome from this game.
And on the other side of the ball, I think the biggest thing that I would be looking for is how disruptive is the defensive line in terms of Maryland's run game. Because Maryland is not very good at a lot of stuff, but they're running back, and now I'm blanking on his name, but he's had a good season. He's been averaging 85 yards
Roman Hemby.
Roman Hemby. He's been able to keep them sort of on schedule, not 300-yard games or anything like that, but they've been effective. And you mentioned they have all 5 of their offensive linemen coming back this year. So Michigan has the best offensive line in the Big Ten. This is not the best offensive line in the Big Ten. But if Ohio State is very disruptive, if you see guys getting in there, the push, Maryland's getting no push at all in the run game, Ohio State's shooting guys through those gaps, that I think would be an encouraging sign, because if you're getting guys in the backfield against Maryland, that's probably the equivalent of just sort of maybe standing Michigan up. This is not what you see against Maryland is not going to be what you're seeing against Michigan. You're going from AAA to the big leagues over the next 2 games. But if they are super disruptive against the run against Maryland, and Maryland just can't get anything going on the ground, that would probably be the most encouraging thing from an Ohio State perspective in terms of what it might mean for the Michigan game.
I'll jump on another one then and say defensive backs battling and getting some PBUs, keeping a talented receiving core limited and stopping them quickly, breaking up passes, stopping the 50-50 balls. You saw how encouraged the coaches were that Cam Brown stopped 2 of those last week. If they do more of that, if Tanner McAllister holds Rakeem Jarrett down in the slot, just things that should happen to continue to see them happen. And again, it's a skilled group of receivers. The numbers are odd, and they run a bunch out there, run a bunch of different receivers, so nobody has huge numbers, but they're all pretty talented overall. And so if the corners are winning those matchups, and I'm expecting it to be Denzel Burke and Jordan
Jordan Hancock.
and then who's the third corner going to be in there? Cam Brown.
Cam Brown.
So those three out there, and J.K. Johnson and Jair Brown, just standing back for a while and letting those three guys go, because those are your three best, and those are the three guys that you want out there, and you want them getting those reps for next week.
Mike Ferguson asked, does the winner of Ohio State Michigan go to number 1 in the college football playoff poll? I would be pretty surprised if they did. It feels like the committee, every time the committee talks about it, it's that Georgia has really separated themselves from the rest of the field. You know, if I very much do not think this is going to happen. If Ohio State or Michigan has a 2014 Big Ten championship game, if someone goes out and puts up a 59-0 in that game, like, okay, like, but it might take something like that, and maybe not even 59-0. If that game's 42-10 one way or the other, okay, then maybe you're having a conversation. But if it's a closer game like we're sort of expecting, I think even if it's 38-24, it's going to be very easy for the committee to look at that and say, well, but Georgia, was up by that game was 27-6 very late in the game against Tennessee. I think honestly, a blowout in the Ohio State Michigan game, one direction or another, would be not bad news for Georgia. It would be good news for Tennessee, because that means the loser of that game is probably not getting in. If Ohio State beats Michigan 38-17, or Michigan beats Ohio State 38-17, the loser of that game is probably not getting in. If it's 35-31, you're having a whole different conversation.
Yeah. I also think if you end up blowing somebody out by too much, you make the opponent look worse. Mm-hmm. And so you make the win look worse, mm-hmm. because, well, if you lose that bad, you can't possibly be the number 2 or number 3 team in the nation. So you have to consider that as well. But no, I think although like a 59-0, I think would help Michigan more than Ohio State, because it would prove like Michigan has finally played somebody, and the best team they've played, they've made look, terrible. Like I'm not saying it's going to happen, but you beat Ohio State 59-0. I think that means more than beating Michigan 59-0.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Michigan, I think you do have the resume thing. Like, I mean, the committee very clearly has some reservations about Michigan and how good Michigan is, and the committee, I think, also looks at teams with like really explosive offenses as being better than teams with sort of efficient offenses and good defenses. Tennessee is an explosive offense. Ohio State is an explosive offense. Michigan has been an efficient offense that sometimes has explosive plays on the ground, but just they don't throw the ball. And I think it feels like if you're not able to throw the ball downfield, let me clarify. They throw the ball, they complete a bunch of passes, but it's all 8-10 yards or closer downfield. JJ McCarthy they've been trying to throw the ball down the field, and just it hasn't worked. And you can put that on JJ McCarthy, you can put that on the receivers, you can put that on whatever you want, but they have not been able to do that. That feels like something the committee is looking at as like a, that's potentially a concern, because if you can't throw the ball down the field, then it's just, are you going to be able to man ball Georgia? Like, I don't think you're going to be able to man ball Georgia. And I don't know that you're going to be able to man ball Tennessee. Tennessee's got a pretty good run defense, and where they're vulnerable is over the top. I think Ohio State Tennessee would be a much more exciting game than Michigan Tennessee, for example.
Well, it's different styles, those two games, but yeah, with the Michigan thing, I mean, they're in the top 10 scoring team in the nation, so they get it done. I think they're probably averaging maybe a little over 420, 430 yards of total offense a game. That's just a guess based on how little they throw and how well they run, but they get it done, and defense is one of those reasons, and the field position is another. But what we've seen them do in the playoffs, and it's just a sample of one against a really good team. So you don't want to just keep going back to that, but it's hard not to, because you've seen how that works. And if you don't have the explosion, then good luck, because everybody else does, and you're going to have a hard time keeping up. And you can only do this, keep running the clock, the man ball thing for so long, because, well, the other team can do some of that as well, but then also they're going to go over the top. And now they've just scored 2 quick touchdowns, and now it's 14-0. And how are you going to come back from this?
And here's Michigan's. I mean, Michigan has some very pretty top line point scoring numbers. Here's Michigan's results against Big Ten opponents not named Rutgers: 34 points, 27 points, 31 points, 41 against Penn State. Obviously, their most impressive win of the year. 29 and 34. It just there's when you look at when Ohio State is in the 40s and 50s routinely. Michigan is in the high 20s and 30s, and that's and we will see. We'll all find out together next week whether this is Jim Harbaugh is doing the old Milton Berle, pulling out just enough to win kind of thing. Because you kind of had that last year where they were, Rutgers had the ball in the fourth quarter with like a minute or two left with a chance to tie the game. And then we saw what happened in the Ohio State Michigan game. So, maybe there is a unique thing that Michigan is built specifically to beat Ohio State in this one specific way. Or maybe this is Michigan just doesn't feel the need to do, they don't need to show off, Tony. They just need to get through and get to the Ohio State game and then win that.
There is a lot of that talk that they don't need to show off, and we'll see, because if they lose to Ohio State and they get left out, maybe they should have shown off some more.
Yeah, they have not been real flashy this year, and it's just been, and even Blake Corum has been a great back, but Blake Corum is piling up great numbers because he's carrying the ball 28 times a game, and he's he is so good at getting you 4 yards, which is, that sounds like a like a backhanded compliment. Like, no, that is just a regular compliment. He is so good at getting you 4 yards. If it is third and 4 for Michigan, he's going to get it. And if he doesn't get it, they're going to trust him to get it on the next one, and he's going to get it on the next one. That is super, super valuable. And it is not flashy, but it has really worked for them.
Well, the Blake Corum thing, and I wrote about this in Michigan Monday this past week. Against Maryland, I believe he had 5 carries over 20 yards. Since then, he has had, I think, 3 carries over 20 yards in Big Ten play, which is crazy, because he's still averaging 6 yards a carry or whatever, 6-7 yards a carry. But it's his long carry from week to week is like 17 yards, something like that. And it's really consistent, and I'm sure it's frustrating as heck for the defense to be like, if we could we're not even giving up home runs. They're just, station to station, hitting singles and turning them into triples and not being born on third base and that sort of thing. And Blake Corum is manufacturing some runs, playing some National League ball. It's the 85 St. Louis Cardinals out there, for crying out loud.
As a 1985 Mets fan, let me tell you how maddening playing the 1985 St. Louis Cardinals was. Jack Clarkin hit the ball over the fence, and everyone else hits. Kevin wants to talk about Tom Niedenfuer, guys. Hang on. No. Ozzie Smith. I mean, come on, the Wizard of Oz.
Tommy Herr
didn't see that coming.
110
RBIs for Tommy Herr out of that 2-hole.
Yeah, 5 home runs on the season.
JJ wants to know, what if the Big Ten East loses to the West somehow in the title game? How does that affect the playoffs?
We have never talked about that.
Well, there's a reason we haven't talked about that. I mean, unless Ohio State or Michigan, the winner of that game, comes out of that so beaten up, that feels like a game where we saw Iowa against Michigan last year on a fast dry track. And it was just, like, oh boy, Iowa's coming in. Oh, nope, game's over. Like, Iowa missed a field goal or something on the first drive, and it was like, and the ball game is over. I think that's very, very unlikely to happen. If it does happen, that is a disaster for the Big Ten, because whoever wins the West is obviously not going to make the playoff. At that point, you have your two teams who are playoff contenders could. Are both coming in with a loss and a loss. Can you put, let's play this out. Ohio State beats Michigan. Ohio State loses to Iowa, 6-4, So if Ohio State beats Michigan 35-31 and then Ohio State somehow loses to Iowa 6-4, what does the committee do? And the answer obviously is contingent on what else has happened. Did LSU beat Georgia in this scenario where we are through the looking glass? I mean, you're getting two SEC teams in there. If TCU wins out, they're in. If USC wins out, they're in.
If there's one spot between Ohio State and Michigan, Ohio State losing in the Big Ten championship game, Michigan losing to Ohio State, I don't think you can give it to Michigan. Because those are the two teams you're deciding between.
Yeah, and the only way you could maybe see that happening is if, Ohio State, they'll take into consideration someone gets hurt. So, some crucial, I'm not even going to throw this out in the universe, a specific name, but some crucial player for Ohio State, Heisman contender for Ohio State, breaks his arm in the Big Ten championship game. And Michigan has lost to Ohio State in overtime or in a close controversial finish, or any close controversial finish in overtime, if you can imagine such a thing. Maybe then, like that's the 1973 Rose Bowl thing where Ohio State tied Michigan 10-10, but Dennis Franklin, the Michigan quarterback, broke his collarbone, and the Big Ten presidents voted to send Ohio State because it was like, well, Michigan doesn't have their starting quarterback. So, and they were both 10-0-1. And so the tiebreaker at that point was the university president's vote, and they voted to send Ohio State. Bo Schembechler was very salty about that. I talked to him about that like 20 years ago when I mentioned this on the show before, but he did a pregame show at the TV station that I worked at in Detroit called the Big Ten Ticket, and he would tape that on Friday. So I'd go shoot the breeze with Bo for 5-10 minutes every week. And at one point that came up, and he was still ticked about that. That was 30 years later at that point. He was still ticked about that. But that was Ohio State went out and just blew the doors off of USC in the Rose Bowl, 42-17, 42-21. So it all worked out okay.
The presidents made the correct call, basically, is what we're saying there. Any other questions, Kevin? How long are we going to?
We're at about 1:06 right now. Here we go.
Rob says, do you think there's part of Chip that is rethinking transferring to OSU? Will he ever be a starter at linebacker? Chip Trayanum, first of all, where was Chip Trayanum before this? Arizona State. How would he enjoy being at Arizona State right now? Probably not that much. They have not had a great season. Fired Herm Edwards. Their coaching search to replace Herm Edwards is kind of a disaster from what I've heard. And so, yeah, I think he's probably fine. And I don't think, come to Ohio State expecting to walk right into the starting lineup, day one at a new program, new position with returning starters at that linebacker group. I think that's we'll see. Steel Chambers and Tommy Eichenberg, either of them could leave for the NFL after this season, and that's a whole separate conversation. But you could have one or more starting linebacker positions open next year, and I think they like him at linebacker. I don't think there's any reason that you haven't heard any of the oh no, it turns out this guy can't play. They need him more at running back right now than they did at linebacker. But I don't think there's any reason to think that he's unhappy with where he is.
No, and they really liked him in camp. He was making plays, talking about how quickly he picked things up, how strong he is, how athletic he is, all of the different things they can ask him to do. So, I think it's not like he's surprised. He came to an Ohio State defense where he agreed to play linebacker. I will come there and play linebacker. And you know what? Ohio State still has 4 returning linebackers who have started. So, he went in knowing that. So, I don't think he's come in and he's regretting anything. Now, that doesn't mean he'll be here next year. I assume he will be. I would be, surprised if he isn't. But there's going to be look at what Cody Simon has been able to do this year as a third linebacker. Pala'i now, Teoche's finding a role now. If you can do some things, Jim Knowles will get you out there. And right now, he's not able to do that at linebacker. But next year, he's everything they say he is, and he's got another year of doing it, although not being able to do it full-time this year. In spring camp and over the season, over the offseason, he'll be working defense entirely, and then he'll be a different player than he was this year. And he was already an exciting player to talk about and think about. And so next year I would expect him to, if he's good enough, they'll find a role for him.
All right, I'm just scrolling through the chat right now, and Kevin is talking about how he's pretty ready for dinner. So I guess it's probably that seems like his subtle way of telling us it's time to wrap it up.
Well, that was just for the chat. That wasn't for you guys.
Oh well, because
we're sitting at 2:54 right now. We want to. We're not going to be able to squeeze another show in. Let's go another at least 10 minutes.
All right, we'll keep going. That's fine. Kevin showing some surprising dedication to the viewers. Also scrolling through, I was enjoying.
My batteries are dead.
I also scrolling through the chat. I was also enjoying all the modern lingo that people were throwing out, and then Kevin throws out "far out," which was that's
groovy, man.
That is groovy. That is in fact groovy. And did you have any other questions, Starred, that you want to get up there? Will CJ run tomorrow in the game? Roger wants to know.
Yeah, I was surprised that he ran last week. So maybe this is something he's doing just to keep comfortable, keep fresh, keep those leg muscles alive and going. I didn't think he would run last week, so I'll say I don't think he should run this week. But again, he needs to be working on that stuff, reading properly, pulling it, and he still needs to get better at getting that extra yard or getting that 1 yard. Yeah, you don't want him to put himself in any danger, but you can run the ball and stay safe with it. I think he needs practice. So I won't be surprised to see him run because you saw how upset he was when he stepped out of bounds last week. Like he wants to show people he can run, and because he wants to prove it to people. So, hey, 4 years ago, what did Dwayne Haskins do?
Yeah. 4 years ago, Dwayne Haskins had 3 touchdowns in the Maryland game running the ball. I remember him using the word confidence. Like it gave him confidence to run the ball the way he did a few weeks ago. Was that in the Northwestern game? After that game, he talked about how running the ball gave him confidence. And it was like, that's a weird way to frame this. But you see it. He looks more comfortable running the ball. And then last week, that one where he pulled it and it looked like he was going to run for about 60-yard touchdown and just stepped out of bounds. Just 1 foot, just stepped out of bounds and was just, looked like Captain Kirk looking up at the sky and screaming, "Con!" It was, he was so annoyed that he stepped out. But that's sort of the flip side of what we talk about with Marvin Harrison, where Marvin Harrison has worked so much that he has this like supernatural ability to know where the sideline is and just get his foot down 3/4 of an inch inside the out of bounds line. And it's like, how could you possibly know where that is? Because you're not looking down and like your peripheral vision isn't that good. Like you're not like the Predator, like it probably. But this is it's like the flip side of that for CJ Stroud, where he's running and then he just sort of loses awareness for a second of where the sideline is because he doesn't have to deal with the sideline very often. He's throwing, he's sitting in the pocket between the hash marks. The sideline is not really a concern for him. And you see that with quarterbacks sometimes, like the famous Dan Orlovsky play where he's just, rolling in the back of the end zone and just like takes 3 steps with his foot on the back line of the end zone. You have to, that takes reps, and sliding, getting comfortable sliding, understanding like, hey, the angle, this guy is coming at me and either I can get out of bounds or this guy is going to take my head directly off of my shoulders 1 step before I get out of bounds. Like understanding all that stuff and where the chains are and all that, that's just reps. So I don't think I would not have him as a big piece of the run game. I don't think I would have 8 called runs for him or something like that. It would not surprise me if there were some called runs for him against Michigan. Mm-hmm. I think, you talked earlier about J.J. McCarthy. It feels like J.J. McCarthy has not run the ball that much in recent weeks. That seems to me like you're headed for a J.T. Barrett thing where J.T. Barrett would run the ball 3 times against Illinois and Indiana. And then it was like, well, it's Penn State week. It's time for 21 J.T. Barrett carries. That feels like you're going to see a lot of J.J. McCarthy running. Not as much C.J. Stroud running next week against Michigan, but some.
Yeah, I would agree. And I said it earlier, like I could see 10, 12 carries for J.J. McCarthy because he is an effective runner. Now, C.J. Stroud this week, I think you won't need it, but he might need it more than Ohio State needs it, so you might see it there.
Brian Laguerre says that J.J. throw to Donovan was not open at all against Rutgers. Do you remember that play?
Was that the touchdown catch there in the end zone, that one? Or
yeah, that was that one. Was that one? Yeah, he had one really nice. That was in the Rutgers game. Yes,
he's like their best 50-50 guy. Like he's one of their, he might be their best receiver in being contested. Mm-hmm. He's really, really good for a running back, and he's talented as a receiver. And I think he's a guy that Lathan Ransom, Ronnie Hickman, those guys better be ready. And if a linebacker's on him, you've done something wrong, basically.
Yeah, and that was also one, when we talk about J.J. McCarthy not being able to throw the ball downfield, we're talking about 30 yards downfield in the air. That play, if I'm remembering that play, that was like something in goal from the 8 or something like that. That was not, 30 yards downfield. I think the concern with JJ McCarthy is finding guys downfield who are covered, not just like wide open. Like he had one to Ronnie Bell at the beginning of last week's game where Ronnie Bell, the TV camera was shot fairly wide and there was like no one else in the picture. Like, yeah, he can make that throw, but
the throw to Donovan Edwards, if I'm remembering it correctly, finally had some touch. And I think touch is one of the things that has been eluding him because everything is just, gunned in there. And I think that one was strong with a little bit of touch.
Jordan Kapler wants to know what former OSU player would excel the most on this team.
You do offense and defense?
Well, my answer to this question at every moment is always Orlando Pace.
Offense and defense.
Offense and defense. Okay, I'll steal your answer and say Antoine Winfield. I guess like would a Beanie Wells type back? I mean, with as many injuries as they've had, a Beanie Wells type back, would it be an Eddie George type back? It feels like running back is kind of the area where, or an interior offensive lineman. Is there a guard you'd want to put on this team? Who would make the biggest difference?
Well, anytime this question gets posed and we talk about it, as Kevin said, Ted Ginn is always a guy that you would like to see in an offense that use the receivers more. I always go to Joey Galloway as well because he's you run a sub 4.2, you bench 400 pounds, you're the fastest guy, the quickest guy. They could have done wonders with him. Offensive line, interior guy, I think like Pat Elflein, something like that. Not that center is necessarily the issue, but they could play him at guard as well. Maybe a better quarterback. The CJ Stroud guy, I'm not sure that he's working out. You were talking about some powerful runners, and I'm thinking, Carlos Hyde wasn't bad, and Beanie Wells was for a time the best I ever saw at Ohio State. But injuries, we've done the injured running back thing here this year. Maybe go somebody who has some more staying power. J.K. Dobbins, 300 carries in 2019. He did pretty good, but did he need Justin Fields? Because we saw what J.K. Dobbins did in 2018 with Dwayne Haskins.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. On the defensive side of the ball, I think you have to go with a corner. I mean, corner feels like that's kind of – so who is the best corner in Ohio State history? You're putting Sean Springs on the field? You're putting –
Well, we're in Maryland, so –
Yeah, he's from Silver Springs, Maryland, right? Yeah. Not far from here. Sean Springs, you could say Antoine Winfield. You could say,
I'm greedy. I put a Bosa or a Young on there and just have
Chase. Yeah, feels like Chase Young should just be the answer.
Yeah, speaking of people from Maryland, Chase Young, and can you imagine Chase Young lining up across from JT Tuimoloau? How many guys you're gonna be running the interior offensive line version of cover zero because sorry we have to double both of the ends. Center, the center's got to block both the 3-tech and the nose. Get that ball out quick.
Yeah, no, Kevin's right. Chase Young, the season he had in 2019 was as good as anything we've ever seen individually. So that's a pretty good answer, and that takes care of the cornerback issue as well.
And the interesting thing there is how many times in the last couple of years we would have said Jordan Fuller's name there. And wow. Boy, if they just had a safety who could play and just keep everything in front of him and not give up any, and it was like, that wasn't even a consideration.
They've got 2 this year with Ronnie Hickman and Lathan Ransom. That's crazy. They should have spaced things out better.
Brandon Laguerre says it was a 30-yard pass. I am not remembering this play at all.
Well, it was caught in the end zone. So let's trust that we are wrong for once and believe. But I thought it was closer than I thought it was like 15 or something. But it's okay. If it was 30, congratulations on the one.
Well, and the one, and it's the one against Rutgers. And how many times have you seen them trying to throw it? And who did they play last week? All these weeks are blending together with them playing terrible opponents.
Last week.
Nebraska.
I would have never gotten that.
Yeah, and it was Nebraska, and then the week before that they played
Michigan State.
No, luckily I still have the tab up.
I'm pulling it up.
It was Michigan State, yes. Nebraska, and then Rutgers before that, and Michigan State before that. There have been multiple weeks where they have been trying to throw the ball downfield, and I think it was last week against Nebraska, where it was just, it constantly looked like the receiver must have been interfered with because the ball was overthrown by 6 yards on all of these. And then you went back and looked, it was like, no, it wasn't, you weren't getting, receivers weren't getting pulled down. It was just, the ball was just overthrown and the wind wasn't a big issue. I think that has to be the biggest concern for Michigan right now is, can they do this?
This catch was this year? What are we talking about?
Yeah, supposedly against Rutgers this year.
26.
26.
Okay. Like the long that Donovan Edwards had receiving in that game was 26.
Okay, so 26 yards. Okay.
I think that's not the he's had other similar length passes, receptions this season. Sometimes he just gets left open on a sideline.
Mm-hmm.
But getting him matched up against a linebacker or a safety, I think that's a good matchup. And I think there's something to that. I don't know who was in coverage on that play. It's clearly a mismatch, but even the coverage was there. He just made the play. So,
yeah,
you should make those plays. Like the quarterback should make those throws. You don't always make those catches, but the quarterback should put the ball in a place where your guy can make a play on it.
Brian Laguerre says, CJ Stroud, 13 of 26, 1 touchdown and an interception versus Rutgers. I mean, okay, that's – do you think Jim Harbaugh would want to trade quarterbacks is, I think, my response to that. And I'm sure he would not say yes, but I'm sure he would if he was given the opportunity. Trade quarterbacks, trade wide receiver units. I mean, we'll probably do a tail of the tape type show at some point with Michigan, but I think quarterback is very clearly an advantage for Ohio State in this game. Wide receiver is very clearly an advantage for Ohio State in this game. Michigan has areas. Michigan's offensive line is better than Ohio State's offensive line. Like not a question to me. Period. End of sentence. Michigan's offensive line is better than Ohio State's offensive line, and that is something that typically does play a big role in this game. So we'll get to that.
Over 10 games, you can pick and choose whichever transitive advantage that your team has over the other, that Ohio State has over Michigan, like the rushing yards against Indiana, stuff like that, where Ohio State's is vastly superior, but that's also the game that Mike Hart went down. So it's like you can't really hold that against him.
Right.
There are numbers throughout where this one makes Ohio State look bad, this one makes Michigan look bad, and it's just one more week till we figure out who actually is the bad team of the two. One of them is good, one of them is bad.
All right, Mozart's Ghost wants to know, do you think Fryer gets some more playing time this week?
Well, Ryan Day was asked about that, I think maybe Thursday, and it's not that he will get more. They're comfortable with him if they need to. He'll continue to play as that fourth jumbo tight end in their Bison package, that extra tight end. So that will continue, but I don't think there's any reason to take DeJuan Jones out and put Josh Fryer in. But they just know, like, if there's an issue, they have a guy that they can trust. He graded out a champion against Indiana, played very well. But I don't think he's going to play more because of it. Now, if they go with that package that he's in, it's because they want to do stuff with that package, with those plays, not just because let's get more Fryer snaps.
Brian Laguerre is going to set a world record for most super chats. Says
$2 at a time.
Wide receiver is the only spot. Michigan. Hey, we did $2 at a time. We did Better Off Dead earlier. Where's my $2? There it is in the super chat. Wide receiver is the only spot. Michigan defense is clearly better. I mean, we'll find out next week.
Wow.
I'm not taking the Michigan secondary over.
Michigan secondary is not better than Ohio State secondary.
Yeah, I don't,
and they won't be in that game. I don't.
Yeah,
I see Michigan's secondary doing worse than Ohio State's secondary in that game.
I think for 2 years I've had questions about Michigan secondary, and last year they were covered up. I mean, you talked about Chase Young solving the Ohio State cornerback questions. Last year you had Aiden Hutchinson and David Ajabo covering those issues. This year, you've tracked this over the course of the year. Michigan's pass rush has been great. They've gotten to the quarterback a lot, as long as it's an obvious passing situation. If it's not an obvious passing situation, that pass rush hasn't been there. They have not played a passing offense that is, how many passing offenses on Michigan's schedule this year would you characterize as, somewhere between functional and competent that they've played already this year?
Just Maryland. And, that's about it. And the difference between Maryland and Ohio State, I think, is pretty vast. So they haven't seen anything like what Ohio State is going to do. Ohio State has seen more offenses like Michigan's than Michigan's seen offenses like Ohio State by far.
Hardy Jen Super Chat. Henry California wants to know if Ladd McConkey would start at Ohio State. I think he might be the third wide receiver.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to watch enough of him in Georgia, but he's always showing up. So I think there's something to be said for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he's not. No one is starting ahead of Marvin Harrison. So then the question is, would he start over Emeka Egbuka? And I mean, maybe he has been very productive this year. So are all the measurables there? He is not the only player in Georgia's offense who doesn't necessarily have the somehow they keep making it work. So they must have some football ability there. Yeah, I think Ladd McConkey does start at Ohio State, especially if Jackson Smith and Jigba is out, but he's not the leading receiver at Ohio State, and I don't know that he's the second leading receiver at Ohio State.
And you can move Emeka outside, obviously, if you need to. I see. What the key is just to continue to disagree a little bit here with Brian.
I'm going to call the 5-minute warning.
Yes. Okay. So we're calling a 5-minute warning here. Brian says Michigan #1 rush total and scoring defense, #2 in defensive efficiency. Yeah. Again, that's just going to run through the list. Again, Colorado State, Hawaii, UConn, 27 points against Maryland, Iowa, Indiana, Penn State. The Penn State game was that was an impressive performance. Penn State's offense is not Ohio State offense caliber. Michigan State, Rutgers, Nebraska. I mean, which of those offenses is I'm not going to say better than Ohio State. I'm not going to say as good as Ohio State. I'm going to say like within an order of magnitude of Ohio State.
None. Penn State is the best offense they have played. Best offense Ohio State has played as well. But we're not telling you the Michigan. We're not telling you touting Ohio State's defensive numbers here. Penn State, the number 36 total offense in the nation, as I checked last, a couple of days ago, and they were the best. I think the second best was maybe Nebraska at 83. Like they were second or third best in there. Mm-hmm. And then you've got like 5 teams that Michigan has played that are in like the 100 to 131 in total offense. So they have played just some really, really terrible offenses, and they've done what they should do. Mm-hmm. And so credit to Michigan. They're limiting everybody to limiting terrible offenses to their terrible offense.
Yep.
Maryland was 25 of 39 for 269, 2 tutties and 2 interceptions in that game. I've got all of those stats in front of me.
I would like to apologize to the listeners for Kevin using the word tutties. We do not approve of the use of the term tutties on the show. That is
trying to get us that super chat for using the lingo.
Yeah,
Brian.
Kevin's lingo doesn't have drip.
Brian wants you to know that OSU has only played 1 top 50 rush offense. Michigan's is 4th. Yeah, I mean, I think you're under the impression that we're saying Ohio State's going to win by 50 points against Michigan. Like that is absolutely not what we're going to say. And we've talked a bunch.
And Michigan's thrown for under 170 yards in its last 4 games. I mean,
yeah.
What does that have to do with the price of tea in China?
What is the price of tea in China? I don't know that.
Hey Google.
We're using the last 5 minutes of this podcast extremely, extremely effectively. Troy V says, I think you nailed it on the Buckeye Weekly, saying that Michigan is built to win the Big Ten. Ohio State has an offense built to win the national championship.
Yeah, and I would agree with what I said.
Well, and here's the thing. In that comment, like that makes it sound like we're saying Ohio State's offense is better than Michigan's offense. Ohio State's offense is built to play well in the college football playoff. I think 2 things can be true here. Michigan is built to win the Ohio State game. And it can be true that Michigan could beat Ohio State this year, but Ohio State would fare better in the college football playoff than Michigan would. Those 2 things can be simultaneously true because of the matchups that you're going to play and who you're going to play and how the style you need to play and the fact that you're playing fast, dry, indoor track, all of that stuff. Ohio State is probably going to be Ohio State probably beats Tennessee and plays an exceptionally entertaining game against Tennessee. Michigan, if they play Tennessee, that's going to go very poorly, I think, because Tennessee has a very good rush defense. Tennessee can throw the ball downfield. I don't think Michigan would have a good time covering who's there, Hyatt, Jalen Hyatt. Yeah, I don't think Michigan would have a real good time covering Jalen Hyatt.
Yeah, Michigan has not done well against the up-tempo stuff, but teams haven't been able to sustain it because you're just playing bad offenses. Mm-hmm. So this would be a Tennessee offense that would be a sustained up-tempo attack that Michigan would have to deal with.
All right, and last one here. Mike says Brian seems to think Michigan has played an elite offense every week, and I don't think anyone is saying that Michigan's played great offense this year, and I think everyone is aware that they have not, and I think everyone's aware that Michigan's non-conference schedule was really bad, and I'm sure if Michigan had it to do all over again, they would probably put UCLA back on the schedule. That I think is going to end up being a big mistake that they scrapped that game, but it is heading into next week. And good news, we're going to have probably about 40 hours of podcast next week to talk about all this stuff. But, heading into next week, I think as we're talking about all this stuff, people are going, oh, man, they're going to pick Ohio State to win by 60. Like, no. I am still not 100% sure who I'm going to pick to win that game. And I'm not, just like, oh, the drama. No, I mean, like it feels like there's like a 30 to 40% chance that Michigan can run the ball on Ohio State and just keep moving the chains and keep, put together 50, all year we've talked about teams aren't going to be able to sustain a 12-play drive against the Ohio State defense. They need to hit a big play. Michigan, I could see Michigan putting a bunch of 12-play, 75-yard drives together against Ohio State. You limit possessions, you win the game, 30, 40% chance of that happening. I think there's a 30, 40% chance of Ohio State, just get off the field enough. You get ahead by 10 points, 14 points. Michigan has to play from behind. They haven't had to play from behind before. That puts more pressure on J.J. McCarthy, and that doesn't go well. And then there's, like a 10, 20% chance that something like that happens. And then J.J. McCarthy has to make plays, and you get the guy who is a little YOLO at times, and you have a couple turnovers, and then things really spiral. I don't think Michigan blows Ohio State out. I could see Michigan winning close. I could see Ohio State winning close. And I think there's a way that it could spiral on Michigan. Not likely, and that's not what I'm going to pick, but I think there's a chance it spirals on Michigan and they lose by 3 touchdowns. That's a 10, 20% possibility.
If this wasn't Michigan and this was a team that looked exactly like Michigan but didn't have Michigan's colors and uniform and helmet, you'd be like, well, this feels like an Ohio State win by a couple of comfortable touchdowns because there's not enough offense for Michigan to keep up. But, it is Michigan, and everybody remembers what happened last year. I still think with J.J. McCarthy, I'll be saying this all next week. First downs are almost going to be as important as third downs. If you hold Michigan to a no gain or a negative gain on first down, that's going to make third downs longer and more difficult to convert. And so if you win first down, pretty good chance you win third down. If you win third down, you win the game.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that's going to do it for right now for us. We are going to head out to dinner. We'll have a Hungry Huddle segment for you on the morning show. We'll have our live pregame show Saturday morning, 9 a.m., maybe 8:55 a.m. We'll go through the availability report. We'll have that for you. Who can play, who can't play, who's made the trip, who hasn't made the trip. That'll be live pregame show. Plan on a few minutes before 9 a.m. on Saturday morning. As soon as that game ends on Saturday, live postgame show. Mark Givler, Devin Radcliffe doing the whole postgame show. And then we'll have interviews with Ohio State players and coaches. Tony and I doing the instant reaction show. And then Saturday night at plan on 11 o'clock p.m., the Ohio State Michigan week kickoff show. We'll do that live here as well. YouTube.com/Buckeye Huddle. Tony looks thrilled. It'll be fine. We'll have football to talk about. It'll be fine. The post-game show, we're going to end up talking some Maryland, and then I'm sure that'll turn into the Michigan show pretty quickly. And then 11 o'clock, no Maryland talk. We're just going to be talking Buckeyes and Wolverines. Kevin says it's time to wrap up. So, Tony, it's time to wrap up.
All right, Tom. Thank you for joining me. Kevin, thank you also for joining me. Thank you all for joining us, as always, here. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the interaction on a Friday when you're just trying to get home. And maybe you are home, so if you are, enjoy your evening. Thank you for everything, really. Remember, check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Please become a member. See us there and say hello to us. Also, YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. That will do it for today, and we will talk to you guys later.